Yeah.
Start. Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So today I have invited Harsha. As I promised you, I'm going to invite a Kubernetes security specialist onto the channel, and he has huge experience on Kubernetes security, overall on security as well. So let us try to make most of this session and let us try to ask Harsha a lot of questions, and yeah, we'll try to put him on the spot. Okay, Harsha, do you want to introduce about yourself?
Sure. Hey, Abhishek. Hey, all. Thanks for having me here. Glad to be here. So, yep, myself Harsha, and I'm a security engineer currently. And my experience is all around cloud security, cloud native security, detection IR. I started as a core, from a core networking background, all with CCNA, CCNP, and definitely interested in Linux networking as well, networking subsystem and stuff. So yeah, from networking, it was all about directly getting into security. Started with cloud security itself, AWS security. Then
Mhm.
we've built a open source SOC, as a small project, and then moving around here and there in DevOps and DevSecops a bit. Then yeah, currently I'm handling cloud security, cloud native, and detection and IR pieces. So yep, this is a brief intro.
Awesome. Like buzzing words. One is cloud native and one is security. So you are dealing with both of the things, and let's focus our session also on both of these things, so that the audience are also everybody is willing to learn security and Kubernetes. Today it's a hot topic. So security on Kubernetes is like icing on the cake. So yeah, let's talk about it. Firstly, uh, for somebody who is just starting their journey with Kubernetes, okay, so what would be the first thing that they will do is, they will try to deploy the target applications onto Kubernetes. Many ways, like people will try to put Kubernetes as the target environment in their continuous delivery pipeline, right? So probably they are doing continuous integration, and end of the day they just try to create a deployment and deploy it onto Kubernetes. Like many people think that, yeah, this is it, my application is running on Kubernetes, but over the period of time they'll realize that, okay, so there are many things that we have to take care of: load balancing, security, admission controllers, a lot of things that will impact. So for someone to start with their security journey on Kubernetes, how do they start? Do they integrate some pipelines in there, or some kind of plugins in their continuous delivery? Or yeah, I will let you answer this.
Sure. Uh, I think to get started with, I think it'll be slightly different for startups who are just starting out, and maybe
Hmm.
people who are like scaled well enough and they're now starting security. But yeah, like
Yeah.
startups thinking about security in early stage is a great thing, and that too, starting out on Kubernetes security is even more great because yeah, that's the
Yeah.
last thing people would start on. So
Agree.
for startups who are investing in Kubernetes security, it is I think they'll more. It is better to focus on something like enforcing policies and shaping up their culture instead of worrying
Hmm.
about some critical aspects, like they need not worry about all the hyped up things, like some critical low hanging fruits and all that, because they're just
Yeah.
starting out. So all they can do is build some really cool, enforce like really good policies right from their code is written, and while things are getting deployed, and even there they
Hmm.
can start out with small tools even as part of the runtime security, that is
Hmm.
post deployment. So, and yeah, like they're good to go with all these basic stuff set up. It could be, most of these could be covered with all the open source tools in the market, in the
Hmm.
creative space. But when it comes to a really scaled, really well scaled enterprise, they have a lot of things deployed. The infrastructure is huge. They have service mesh deployed and all around and all these kinds of things. For them it is better, they can focus more on low hanging fruits and crown jewels.
Hmm.
And like, let's say things like, hey, I have nodes in the public, in the perimeter, and there's log4j
Yeah.
running. First they'll have to sort out all the critical things, all the perimeter stuff and all these things, and then maybe look at policy enforcement, and looking at the shift left model, typical shift left model,
Hmm.
where enforcing policies at CI itself, or code itself, code at
Yeah.
rest. So I think, yeah, the approach is slightly different for people who have scaled up and people who are just starting out. So yep.
So what kind of policies, enforcing policies, like are we talking about something like your Kubernetes network policies, or Kubernetes admission webhooks. These are the kind of policies or anything else?
Yeah, these are the kinds of policies at various stages. Let's say take example of I want to ensure my cluster configuration security where only
Mhm.
secure configuration of the cluster should go out, where I can use a small OPA agent like Gatekeeper or
Yeah,
tool like Kyverno, which is gaining good traction in the
yeah.
market.
Mhm.
So yeah, these are the things which I can simply use to ensure some kind of policies around, that, at least, level zero things,
Awesome.
basic things, that
Yeah.
basic network segmentation and, basic RBAC policies and basic cluster settings, that TLS and all these things, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, to get started with, like, these should be good.
Yeah, even we did a video on Kubernetes. I think yeah, it's gaining a lot of
Okay.
popularity because it not just you can also heal your behavior if someone is doing wrong. You can automatically fix it, or you can just send out some notifications. Yeah, it's a pretty cool tool, and for
Right.
someone who is very new to admission controllers and all, it does a lot of things for you, right? Yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
So, okay, this is all about your runtime security, right? So, even before runtime security, let's say that I'm pretty new to all these security things, okay? And I'm
Hmm.
not even sure that my container image is secure or not, because that's a very basic thing, right? So, what I
Right.
do as a DevOps engineer, I just pull some base image from Ubuntu or from somewhere, I just pull a base image and I put all of my dependencies into it and I just deploy into my Kubernetes cluster, okay? Until and
Hmm.
unless something is really messed up in the production, I wouldn't know because my CI/CD pipeline is merely creating a container and I'm deploying the container and it is good to go. Someone else is using it.
Hmm.
But one fine day, I
Right.
came to know that, oh, okay, because I use this base image, something is affected and the end users are impacted. We get to know all of these things,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
how do I mitigate this thing? Like as a newcomer, if I want to put something in my pipeline, say that this container image is not good, it has some
Hmm.
known vulnerabilities. How do I achieve that?
Got it. So since you've talked about a lot of things, since you've involved CI/CD and all this stuff,
Yeah,
so for beginners and who's getting into Kubernetes security, I think we can keep things very simple for them.
yeah,
All like, how do they look at KTA security, and then what should be their focus on, right? So how
hmm,
should they look at it? It's fairly simple. Pre-deployment, while something is getting deployed, and again
hmm,
post-deployment, right? So pre-deployment is all your code at rest in GitHub, since that is your any SEM for that matter, but that is your source of truth for all your
yeah,
infrastructure running today. So then you've got your things getting deployed. Then what can you do while they're getting deployed? Then what
yes,
after deployment, right? Let's say something is already deployed,
hmm,
something is going wrong. What is your safety net? What max you can do after something goes
yes,
wrong, right? I think these are the three stages which you'll have to look at while securing something. And how do you, I mean, where all to focus on is something which we can rely on, like you rightly said, CI/CD, where,
hmm,
since CI/CD is like a point where it is responsible, where a control point where everything is deployed, everything is created
yes,
and stuff, right? So I think coming to pre-deployment, all I can do is let's say run my static checks all in my GitHub, in my
hmm,
CI stage, right? Then there is a
yeah,
deployment state where things are really getting deployed, and then
yes,
again this post deployment where things are getting deployed into my target environment, which is in this case Kubernetes cluster, right?
yeah,
So in terms of CI, or before, even when code is at rest,
hmm,
let's say I have my K8 as manifest, I have my Docker files,
hmm,
I have all these Helm charts and stuff, right? Where I
yeah,
can run all my static checks, right?
hmm,
uh, Static checks, as in, you can use tools like KICS kicks, or you can use like Kublinter, or you can use
yeah,
Chekhov, and which just looks
hmm,
at your manifest files and tells you, something is wrong in your manifest, and these are the things I could find. And
awesome,
post that, it is your deployment state. The reason to emphasize a bit on deployment state is, think of a scenario where your Terraform code is there in your GitHub, where you already
hmm,
run your static check, right?
okay,
But there are certain things coming from your vault. Let's say security
hmm,
group ingress rule 0000 is a variable coming
yeah,
from vault, right? Even
okay,
if I
okay,
run a static check, I did not even find it, right? So let's
yeah,
say think of deployment state where I do a Terraform plan and it spits out a state file where all
got
my
it,
variables are replaced with the actual values. So if I run
Yeah.
a scan again in my deployment state, and I find that, hey, a node in this cluster is going public, or this
Hmm.
AMI is not being used, a different kind of AMI is being used.
Hmm.
So there's a deviation. This is where I can, get hold of a lot of things in my deployment state.
Hmm.
Then post deployment is all runtime security and you know logging, auditing, where I have to give a lot of importance to logging, monitoring,
Yeah.
and alerting. Right. I think this is mostly it. But the reason we have to give importance to the whole CI/CD for
Hmm.
Kubernetes is just the fact that, let's say, when I look at all these C's, the way they define, right? Let's say
Hmm.
if I have to secure one cluster or layer,
Hmm.
it is dependent on multiple things in my environment. Because let's say if you look at, I see it infrastructure in these, in this category, saying there are 6 C's and there are seven underlying C's. 6 C's are my
Hmm.
CDN layer,
Okay.
my public layer, then there is cloud layer, then there is clusters. Inside clusters, I mean, clusters could be
Hmm.
your ELK, Kubernetes, Kafka, Redshift, number of clusters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then inside
Yeah.
my clusters, I've got my compute. It could be my EC2s, any VMs, end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
It could be serverless as well, Lambda, ECS,
Hmm.
and stuff. Then I've
Hmm.
got my container layer, right? Fifth
Yes.
C, which is my atomic compute layer. And inside that, I've got code running, right? Application
Yes.
code running. So these are my 6 C's, and there's an underlying C, which is called compliance, because I'll have to be
Yeah.
compliant to various things in all these layers, right? So
Exactly.
that's why the best. So every layer is dependent on other layer. I can just not
Hmm.
secure my cluster and sit like that. I'll have to secure various things. That's why I think CI/CD would be the best way to go about this,
Awesome.
which covers, like,
Yeah.
all the layers of this. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So, like, if we go back a bit, like you said, you rightly said that we can divide this into three stages, right? One is pre-deployment, one is deployment itself, and one is the runtime. Okay. So, pre-deployment, you have covered bunch of things, like, you can use a kubelinter. So that itself will look into a YAML manifest and say, hey, you're using latest tag, which is not right. So replace it with
Right.
whatever tag it is, for example. Okay. So regarding pre-deployment, perfect. Now, can you suggest some tools with respect to deployment stage and post deployment? So, for example, when I am deploying, what kind of tools can I use to say that my image has or my container has some vulnerabilities, or else in the post deployment, the things that you talked about, auditing or logging. So, how do I catch them?
Hmm.
So, what are some of the popular tools in the deployment and post deployment?
Got it. In terms of
Hmm.
deployment, I think, let's say if I have my container already present in my ECR, I mean, once it is built in my CI
Hmm.
state and is, it's pushed into ECR, for example, or any other
Exactly.
repository, Docker Hub, for
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
I can run, container scans using tools like Trivi or something, or AWS ECR scan itself, where,
Perfect.
I'll know, like, because there's a difference. I can run a scan on Docker file versus a fully built container image, which, dependencies will be clear once it is built, right? So
Exactly.
the scan is more comprehensive and clear. And
Yeah.
post that, I can have, as I told before, I can run some policy engines here. It could be
Hmm.
Gatekeeper, OPA agent, or it could be, Kyverno as well, where,
Hmm.
and even Terraform, right? Even once the plan is
Yeah.
ready, as I said, I can know, what is getting deployed, right? If something is failing, I can just, send out an alert saying, hey, I don't want to deploy this because there's a huge deviation, and this is what I found,
Got
right?
it.
I've written this
Got it.
policy, and this is the deviation. And we can use
Got it.
tools like Checo, same things again, which will
Hmm.
also scan my TF state file and stuff, right?
Got
So
it.
in deployment state, I can deploy a policy engine, as well as run some checkout scans, and highlight some alerts on top of this.
Hmm.
And coming to post deployment, it's mostly runtime. And again, this is where a lot of importance to be given on logging, monitoring, and alerting, as I said before. So speaking of runtime security, why is it important, right? So let's say,
Hmm.
as an attacker, if I look at your cluster, I don't know you're running K8s and stuff, right? I just look at your
Hmm.
application, which is sitting inside a pod. So let's say I find a loophole in your application, I just exploit it. Let's say I get a reversal to your pod, right?
Okay.
End of the day,
Hmm.
I get a reversal to your container. What will an attacker do, right? Let's say I get into a container, I'll see what is even running in that, right? What processes
Hmm.
are running, whom is it talking to, what secret it has got
Hmm.
access to, what mounts are, mounted, what volumes are mounted and stuff. see what is running, and then I'll see, what all I can steal from the container, query EC2 metadata, get my
Yeah.
role creds and all. Then I'll try to break out of the container, from pod to host, get access of the host, and see what all I can do from the host. Then, go about taking control of the cluster and all these things. Here is where, I cannot be like, hey, like, my cluster, I've scanned everything and everything is perfect. My cluster is running. But runtime security is like, really important because all these things can happen and a lot of anomalies
Yeah.
you'll have to be continuously monitoring, right? These kinds of anomalies, right? Just as an
Makes sense.
example, a pod has to access secret A, suddenly it is accessing secret B, right? It has got nothing to do with secret B, it is trying to access, right? These are
Yeah.
the kinds of anomalies you'll have to definitely look for. And some really good tools in runtime security are, Cilium Tetragon, and Falco of Sysdig, Falco from Sysdig, right?
Yeah.
And recently Cubeshark, more like a monitoring tool. It will not enforce anything as runtime, but Sysdig
Yeah.
Falco can write runtime security policies
I
as well.
think not as matured as Sysdig. Right? Kubeshark can do a
Definitely,
bit, but not as Sysdig. Yeah. Yeah.
definitely, yes. Yeah, recently exploring Cubeshark a bit, generally to
Hmm.
maybe deepen my understanding of how different API calls are made in the cluster and get
Hmm.
a feel of how what's happening in my cluster like really quick, right?
Makes sense.
That is where Cubeshark really helps creating service maps and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, these are some good runtime tools. And coming to logging and monitoring, yeah, in deployments like if your KTS is like a COPS based or it's a Minikube based, it's not
Hmm.
easy that you can just turn on auditing just like that. It's a
Yeah.
process, right? You'll have to go through a bunch of steps. Again, if it is EKS or GK, it's fairly simple. It'll write logs into CloudWatch, right, and all. But yeah,
Hmm.
again, turn on logs and monitor for anomalies. And this is where you'll have to leverage some kind of advanced, eVPF based tech where you
Hmm.
get the correlation between L3, L4, and L7 instead of just relying on old network based logs like Wireshark and stuff. So turn on
Hmm.
monitoring, and it could be even whatever is being deployed, all the Kubernetes API calls. Also, sometimes the pod, what's happening inside the pod has to be monitored. And yeah, it's fairly simple, and creating alerts on top of that.
So, okay, like these are some of the things that we discussed, like the huge number of things. So, one basic question that anybody who is watching this video might have is how do I learn all of these things, right? So, there are fairly large number of things like, there is CubeShark, there is Sysdig, there is lot of number of tools in the market that are available, right? And so,
Right.
what is the simple way? Like, let's say I'm very good with Kubernetes, but I don't know how to
Hmm.
start my security journey on Kubernetes. Okay. So if that
Hmm.
is the case, how would I start my security journey on Kubernetes? Because going ahead, everybody should know this, right? At this point of time, it's niche. But after a while,
Fair.
everybody should start learning the security aspect of Kubernetes as well. So how do I achieve that? If I'm a person who is good with Kubernetes, but zero in security of Kubernetes. So yeah, can you
Fair enough.
share?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, fair enough. So I think about learning, I think nobody needs to worry about the tools and all because I think the number of tools in security industry are more than the number of people today. So nobody can learn like,
Yeah,
all these tools and stuff. So
yeah.
it's more about learning it, whenever it's needed, right? Let's say
Hmm,
I have thousands of things to do in securing a Kubernetes cluster, right? But
hmm,
what is
hmm,
important is what is burning right now and looking from an attacker's perspective and what's a burning priority for you, right? And then
hmm,
it
hmm,
makes sense to learn that kind of tool. It's not like I learn 10 tools and then start KTS security, right? Just start
hmm,
what is
hmm.
wrong with KTS and then start learning a tool, right? Let's say I
Yeah.
want to do runtime security because uh, you know I see a lot of anomalous traffic in my cluster. Later I'll
Hmm.
focus on my CI and stuff. Fine. Just start with the runtime security to learn it and that's it. It's not like don't worry about the tools. It's all
Hmm.
again it's just a tool end of the day, so you can just learn it in a weekend and
Yeah,
stuff. So not a big
yeah.
deal. Yeah.
So the first thing that you need to do is to understand, as a basic user in Kubernetes, what you need to do is firstly try to understand how things can break, right? So
Right.
from that, maybe you can understand, okay, so this is how I can mitigate the security, and this is the tool that can help me mitigate the security, right?
Right.
Probably
Right.
something.
Absolutely.
So
Right.
maybe I'll ask you some bunch of questions, and as a security person, you can answer those questions, and people who are watching this video, they can understand. Oh, okay. So this is the thing, and this is how it can go wrong, and this tool can mitigate. For example, okay,
Yeah,
let's
makes sense.
say, yeah, a very fairly simple question. Whoever is starting with Docker and Kubernetes, what they usually do is they just write the Docker files and execute the container, and sometimes they leave the container as is, like they run the container as a root user. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
so for
Makes
somebody
sense.
who
Yeah.
is starting the journey with Kubernetes and Docker, that is very commonly possible. We also did it, right?
Right.
So run a
Right.
container using a root user, and if you run a
Hmm.
container using a root user, it can mess up the entire thing as well, right?
Right.
So
Makes sense.
which tool can catch this, and if not tool, as a security engineer, how to catch this?
Sure. So, I mean, again, caching this is again from various layers we have just spoken about. Either whenever a Docker file is written, I mean, let's say a K8s manifest file is written, if you have that run as root, run as which user flag set, there itself we can catch that it is running as root. And yeah, let's say if they're using host IPC or host network, this is where
Yeah,
we can
anything.
try using all these, there itself. But let's say we do not have anything in the static code analysis, static manifest analysis. In terms of runtime, I think, yeah, something like Falco or Cilium Tetragon can help because it will have the context of the host and even the container runtime. Whenever a container is
Okay.
getting spun up, it will know that it is running as root and it has got access to this host IPC or host PID and right,
Awesome.
all these things. So it will definitely, you can easily set up an alert if you're running something like Tetragon or something. So yeah,
Okay.
that should really help.
So okay, so what you're basically saying is either catch it in the early static code analysis for somebody who does not understand static code analysis. Basically, catch it in your CI itself using some tools that can scan your YAML files and say that, hey, you're using run as root. For some reason, if you're not able to catch there, then probably during runtime you can use sysdig or something and catch. Am I right?
Right, right. You've rightly put it. Right.
Awesome. Awesome. And okay, so one more thing, or one more question that I have is, let's say you have done everything right. Okay. For
Hmm.
some reason,
Hmm.
there is a malicious user, or there is a user with wrong intention, and what he or she has done is they logged into the container, and somehow
Hmm.
they started accessing all the files they shouldn't access, or they
Hmm.
started copying files. So even can we track this thing using auditing? And if yes, how you can catch this specific activity? Like for example, if you leave the Kubernetes and everything aside, if I go to a
Hmm.
simple virtual machine or a physical server, and if I try to open one of the root files, then immediately you get a
Hmm.
notification that in a specific file called spool, your activity is recorded, and your administrator will
Right.
know about it. This happens in
Right.
Linux, basically. Now, similarly, how this thing happens in Kubernetes, and how a security engineer would get notified about this activity.
Hmm. Okay. So let's say you have a runtime tool deployed already, runtime security tool.
Hmm.
What you can
Hmm.
monitor is like it monitors, let's say we deploy a daemon set on all the nodes as an
Yeah.
agent, which will monitor for all parallel container logs, right? Every container running in your
Hmm.
EC2 will send logs to me, right? After this, so
Okay.
let's say whatever I do a cat etc password, I access
Yeah.
something I shouldn't access,
Hmm.
I touch a privileged socket or whatever. I get, since I have access to all these logs, I think, I can alert on top of this. So this is where, Cilium
Okay.
Tetragon helps a lot, right? Where it monitors for all this and it gives you a very easy, YAML based alerting logic
Hmm.
and monitoring logic. So you can simply look for specific keywords like, oh, somebody is doing a cat on Etsy shadow or just as an example, right?
Got it.
So
Got
somebody is
it.
doing a ch root command and you can just define these in YAML and it will alert you whenever it's
And
needed. Yeah.
do you need to do any additional configurations for Tetragon, Sysdig? I think, yeah. So any of these tools, do you have to do any additional configuration to send out the logs to, let's say, CloudWatch uh, or any of the default logging tools, or do they
Hmm.
do it by default depending upon the cloud provider?
So no, these tools, let's say for example,
Hmm.
Cilium, I think you will have to send it to your SIM if needed. They're not going to push
Okay.
it to your SIM because they'll just monitor it and write alerts. But let's say you'll have to do it on like large number of clusters. You'll definitely pull all these logs to SIM and run monitors and alert there. It makes more sense because I want to reduce the compute consumed for alerting in the cluster itself. I'd rather use a SIM to do all this. It's, let's say I'm taking a example of like 50 GB of logs a day, right? If I have like
Okay.
10, 20 clusters as such. So it makes more sense to do all this analysis and correlation in SIM rather
Hmm.
than doing it in cluster and wasting cluster resources for all these activities. So yeah, it makes sense to move it to SIM.
Okay. So from there you can get whatever is required, right?
Right. All alerting and all the logic there makes sense.
Awesome. Awesome. So, okay, so this is all some basic questions that I have. And after this, let's say I want to, not as a security engineer, but as a regular DevOps engineer or as a developer, anyone who is a developer who is watching this video. So, if they have to start their way of writing secure code, so it does not mean to
Hmm.
be like Java code, or it doesn't have to be Golang code or something. It can be even simple YAML manifests, or it can be simple Terraform files. So
Hmm.
are there any IDE plugins, or are there any tools that they can incorporate at their end? So even without going to the CI, or even without going to the runtime, so they can also
Hmm.
understand, hey, I'm writing some code that is not secure. It can be it can be source code, or it can be any YAML manifest files as well. So
Hmm.
any suggestions there?
Yeah, I think a lot of tools are matured in this space, moving more left, right, towards the developer and where he's rightly
Yeah,
coding, right? He's coding in his
yeah,
ID and then putting it on GitHub. So makes more sense to move left. So there's a lot
yeah.
of tools like I think Snyk has a plugin for a Visual Studio plugin, and I think even Chekhov does, if I remember correctly, Chekhov does it. I think Terraform
Okay.
commenter and all these tools will rightly sit in your ID and look for the whenever you're writing the code, it will just alert you. But
What was
yeah,
the
it
first one?
again
Sorry.
there's I think Snyk
Sneak.
SNYK.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. SNYK. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think you can also scan your these things with Sneak. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that every developer should have, right? On
Right.
their
But all this
personal front.
boils down to again, sorry, again, all this boils down to interesting topic, security culture, because I mean,
Yeah.
developers should be fine having all these tools in their IDE and, all these things, tools
Mhm.
disturbing them while coding with their focus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, it's all about the
Yeah. But
culture and, hmm,
eventually everyone has to move to this, right? Whether you are a startup. So you will not end up being a startup. Your goal would be to become a big company, right?
right.
So when you become a
Absolutely.
big
Yeah.
company, and if you are not having all of these things in your startup, like today you can just write code and deploy it to your
Hmm.
one or two customers. But after that, if you try to change, then it becomes practically impossible to you to go back and fix all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Absolutely.
So, do you encourage DevOps engineers to do any certifications that will give them knowledge on these things, or any website or any documentation that they can go through? And probably because all
Hmm.
of these things are scattered in multiple places. Today, if I have to go and learn about sysdig, okay, only if I know
Hmm.
that there is a tool called sysdig, I can go and learn about sysdig. But for
Hmm. Hmm.
someone who does not know how to handle the Kubernetes security, or they just want to read through a book, or they just want to read through a website which says that,
Hmm.
see, these are all the mishaps that can happen, and these are the tools that. So any suggestions in that space?
Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of certifications and all, but I think
Yeah.
there's a bunch of tools on GitHub. So like things like awesome Kubernetes security and all these things, right? Where you can go
Okay.
and see a consolidated set of resources which are
Hmm.
we spoke about multiple layers, and they have like
Hmm.
beautifully put it in those repositories, like a bunch of repositories out there. So
Awesome
anybody
Kubernetes,
can go
right?
there and yeah, awesome Kubernetes
Yeah.
security and all these
Awesome.
things there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think yeah, these are the resources somebody can refer to, and yeah,
Hmm.
they should be good, and maybe like all bunch of free videos on YouTube. So
I think I will
that should
try to
do.
put that link in the description as well. That awesome Kubernetes security. Yeah, it's a very good
Yeah, yeah,
repository when I have gone through that.
yes.
Okay, so one thing very interesting question that I have, and I think both of us are in the same page here. Like, I'm also not at all a fan of certifications, but you know,
Hmm.
coming, I mean, I never imagined that someone in the security space would say this, because what I've seen in my past organizations is to get into the security roles itself. people expect a lot of certifications. Unlike, like for example, if you are into coding or if you are into DevOps, probably people might not worry a lot about this. But if you are moving towards security or if you are moving towards any niche things, then they might expect you to do some certifications because they don't want to they don't want you to mess up their environment and all without proper understanding, right? But
Yeah, makes
these
sense.
days, yeah, but these days these certifications are overpriced. That's what I feel, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
people just do it for the purpose of doing it, not that people want to test their knowledge, or not that people there is a overall hype that is created that do this certification, you'll get a job on this. But
Hmm.
in real time, that's not truth, right? So what is your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on certifications, the only benefit I get is a structure towards the course, right? Like it is a
Hmm.
very well structured course, so I can follow the syllabus and stuff. But spending money on getting a cert is more like I have a engineering degree versus I'm a truly having an engineering mindset, right? So that is the
Yeah.
difference I feel.
Yeah.
I don't spend much money on certs and all. Rather, I'll definitely spend on courses and stuff because in terms
Hmm.
of security, the way we look at
Hmm.
people, right? If I'm recruiting a security engineer, we look
Hmm.
for the mindset mostly, right? It should be a
Okay.
security mindset. So
Hmm.
it should be more like a engineer is always innovative, right? It's not like a tool operator where he knows like,
Hmm.
I know like 10 tools and tools are, just like
Doesn't
practice it
matter.
and you'll be smart at. You will be smart at
Yeah,
it in like, 2 months or so. It's more of
that's it.
this skill that, you know, let's say if you are able to make this change in the culture, right? For
Hmm.
example, where I see a progress in security engineer, right?
Hmm.
It's not about how many tools he knows or what he can do or what all he can break into, right? It's more about how many people he can really, empower in terms of security, right? So let's say if I'm taking 30 days to solve a security problem today, I mean,
Okay.
6 months or 1 year down the line, I should just take 5 days or 6 days because
Okay.
you are changing the culture of the org in such a way that developers are really taking security seriously and they feel that org is their home, right? They secure it by
Got
default.
it.
I mean, that
Got
is
it.
something they'll have to keep an eye on, right? Rather than, okay, I have all the tools, I have all the people, I have the checklist 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, security is done. It is not like
Hmm.
that, right?
Hmm.
It is more of how it's more about
Got
culture
it.
and I mean, you'll have to change that people is the weakest link, right? People are the weakest link. That
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
changed, right? We are giving so much of importance to tech and so many, complex security solutions, but
Hmm.
always the people are the weakest link. I mean, who's going to fix that, right? I think when
Got it.
somebody tries some innovation in this space, somebody makes progress in this space, then I think yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. So, how is the future in the space of DevSecOps, or how is the future in the space of Kubernetes security?
Hmm. Kubernetes security is sorted, like it's awesome because it's
Yeah.
I think whenever a product is in the market, it'll take 5, 6 years for it to gain traction, community support and stuff. Like Kubernetes
Hmm.
is second most favorite open source software. I think
Yeah.
security will come in after like 5, 6 years. So now is the time. It's booming. So a lot of people don't even understand the difference between cloud and cloud native and all. So it's
Hmm.
really great time to invest in cloud native security in KTS,
Awesome.
like all the cloud native components, right? Yeah, it's a really a great time to invest time in.
Yeah, I would also suggest people who are watching this video to, like, if you don't want to get into the security space, that's still fine. But understand security, because,
Mm,
at any point, like Harsha told, people are the weakest point, right? So
mm, mm,
if you try to write code in a secure way, or if you try to at least think whether you are doing a very simple thing as well. Sometimes, like I told you, people might feel that this is a very simple thing, there is no problem with it, let me push the code. So if you
mm.
don't have proper checks, or if you're not thinking in a secure manner, then you
Mm.
can mess up a big time, and even your simple thing might cost a lot to your organization, right? Do you
Yeah,
agree?
yeah. Yes, yes. Security, the only profit is protection here. More you protect, the more profit here is because no protection,
Yeah.
no profit. So it is an area like that. And yeah, everyone is definitely responsible. It should be like their home. And I
Hmm.
mean, org should be their home and they should always feel like, how do they secure it?
But sometimes is it not overwhelming with the number of tools that come into this space? like Kubernetes itself, like every other day you wake up, there is some tool that starts with K, or there is some tool that starts with Cube, and it's become overnight favorite,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And
Yes.
like people go crazy about these tools in the Kubernetes space. And if you talk
Hmm.
about security, then at least I hear a new tool coming into compliance space. I hear a new tool coming
Hmm.
into Kubernetes security space. So how do you handle this thing? Like whenever you hear about a new tool, do you get into it, or what is your approach?
Hmm. I think there's always this FOMO, fear of missing out in this industry, right? So
Yeah.
every day there's a
Yeah.
new tool, definitely yes. But again, it's all about defining learning, right? Let's say I define I
Hmm.
want to learn this. I just define that because if I'm open, if I'm going in a open-ended direction, it's always like
Hmm.
I consume bunch of tools and end of the day I'll have nothing in my hand, right? It's all about define
Yeah.
learning and always solving with a purpose, right? If there is no purpose, don't even look at a tool. It'll mess your
Yeah.
it's more like a library, right? In your mind. So don't
Yeah.
even mess with the tool unless there's a purpose.
Awesome. Yeah. So I would like to ask you more questions, and I would like to do a more detailed video. But yeah, unfortunately, we have to restrict with the time and people who are watching this video. I will assure you that I'll bring Harsha one more time, and we'll do part two, part three. But only with respect to your understanding on this specific topic. Like, do let us know in the comment section. What do you feel about this video? Do you have any questions for Harsha? You can ask him in the comment section, and I'll make sure that he replies to your comments if possible. Yeah. But yeah, it was very nice talking to Harsha and understanding all of these things. And I'll definitely look forward to make more videos. And probably next time we can come up with a specific topic, and we can go in detail with that if you have time. Sure.
Definitely, we'll keep doing this more often, and yeah, this is awesome because a lot of things, even I get to learn a lot of things about myself, here because we'll never know what we know, right? So it's discovering me
Yeah.
again. So I'm enjoying this. So yeah, we'll definitely do this often. Glad being
Sure,
here.
Harsha. Sure, Harsha. Yeah, guys, keep watching this space. You will learn more about cloud native. You learn more about security. You learn more about cloud. So yeah, definitely let us know in the comment section your feedback, and we'll meet you next time. Thank you so much, and bye, Harsha.
All right, bye.